All right, I have some wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses for you guys to target this week, week 3 on DraftKings. So let's get into it. If you look at the key, I have cash plays, some viable stackable options, value, tournament, and then for subscribers, smash plays. So let's get into it. So Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, two wide receivers over 9K this week. Justin Jefferson obviously has the highest totals, probably going to be the highest owned wide receiver as well. It's a great matchup in a top 10 PFF, not only matchup grade, but pass block advantage. So that means the Vikings should have a little more time to throw the ball. But Justin Jefferson, 9,300, obviously probably one of the favorite plays of everybody. So if you can afford to pay up for him, go for him. Tyreek Hill, same thing. I at this point he's matchup proof. He can go against anybody and have a good game. Miami was able to run the ball a lot against New England. That's kind of why his points kind of went down compared to what they usually are. They just didn't have to use them as much. But with Jalen Waddle out, possibly being out, leaning towards out, Tyreek Hill might become that much more playable. Amon-Ra, I think, can move to cash depending on. It seems like he's going to be good to go to play against Atlanta. The matchup is scary, but with how much volume he gets, it doesn't really say a lot considering their opponents. Week 1 was Carolina, but Jordan Love in that offense was able to have a decent game through the air. CeeDee Lamb, tournament play only because of them being such high favorites, right? 12.5 point favorites. I still think CeeDee Lamb is going to get his, but I wouldn't expect a crazy good game enough to where, you get some of these players like an Amon-Ra or Justin Jefferson to where the game should be close and back and forth, and they're going to be included a lot for some deep passes, stuff like that. But I still think CeeDee Lamb eats. I just think there's some other options in some other games, especially like Keenan Allen, 7,600, right? Highest total of 54. Great matchup against Minnesota. I said their secondary is lackluster, and it's been proven. You saw someone like Devontae Smith just eat up that defense. 36.8 fantasy points a game to wide receivers, so that's something to watch out for as well. Calvin Ridley, 7,200 is a cash play for me. Stingley's out for Houston. That's a huge loss. He's played very well for him since joining them. Honestly, I think the overall matchup versus man versus zone favors Calvin Ridley, and it's a good bounce back opportunity after kind of having a shaky game against Kansas City. Him and Trevor Lawrence just didn't seem like they were on the same page. So 72 Calvin Ridley, I think, is a great play at his price. Chris Olave, another one, 7,000 against Green Bay. Great matchup for him as well. Look at the teams Green Bay has played. They played Justin Fields and my Bears offense, and that offense has looked bad. And then they played Atlanta, and they don't pass the ball. So this is a really good opportunity to see how the Packers defense really is. But if someone's going to eat, Chris Olave is probably going to be that guy. 6,900 DK Metcalf is a tournament play for me. I can't spell injury right on him, but his injury status is concerning to me. He was a full participant in practice on Friday, so that is something that makes it more likable. But if he is in, it's a really good matchup for him and Tyler Lockett. Garrett Wilson, I think, is another good tournament play, right? Probably not going to get a lot of ownership with Zach Wilson as the quarterback. That going against New England is always scary to hear. But an injury on the secondary, and you hear how good Garrett Wilson is against man, and New England runs man a lot. Top 5 defense in man coverage. Doesn't mean they're going to continuously run man, but they're going to run man more times than most teams do, and that's where Garrett Wilson and apparently Zach Wilson have a better connection. Tyler Lockett, 6,400. You can see I favor him over DK. Right, it's a $500 pay down, so it's not a crazy pay down, but it is $500. And Carolina's a team that runs zone coverage a lot, right? Injuries now on Shaq Thompson, J.C. Horn. So Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, even JSN should eat pretty good in this game against Carolina. That they're home. Always know how Seattle plays when they're home. So 64, Tyler Lockett is definitely a cash play for me that I like. Michael Pittman, 6,200 is a tournament play with Gardner Minshew in. Plus the amount of injuries on Baltimore. There's they played well against Cincinnati, but that second half Cincinnati team looked really good. Gardner Minshew and that Colts team looked really good when Minshew took over as well. Was able to connect with the tight ends, get Pittman involved, stuff like that. So 6,200 Michael Pittman. I'm wanting some decent exposure in tournaments. Mike Williams at 6,000. I think I'm gonna end up moving to a cash play. In all reality, I think it's a good, not only just a pay down of 1,600 off of Keenan Allen, but the matchup favors him just as much as it does Keenan Allen. So Mike Williams at 6,000, I think is a very solid run back piece. If you stack a Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, I think Mike Williams is a really good run back piece. Saves you a little bit of bank, still costs on that heavy side, but saves you a lot more than paying 1,600 more for Keenan Allen. Plus Austin Eckler is still out, so that's something to watch. Christian Watson here, just watching the injury status. If he's in, that is an interest to me. Amari Cooper 5,700 against Tennessee is a cash play. His price is cheap for what he does, right? Should be healthy this week. Granted, it's a shorter week for him, but or it's not. I guess you can say it's a shorter week because they played Sunday night, but it's not. Amari Cooper, though, third most fantasy points a game to wide receivers Tennessee allows, so that's a huge plus. I don't think there's really a corner on Tennessee that can cover Amari Cooper. Plus, with Nick Chubb being out, obviously you have Jerome Ford, but Tennessee plays a run pretty good, so you could see Amari Cooper get some more targets because of how bad the run game possibly will be, especially with Cleveland missing some offensive linemen. Jordan Addison, 5,500 is a stackable option, right? Obviously, if for some reason you don't play a Justin Jefferson and Kirk stack, but you want some exposure, right? Let's say you don't play Kirk Cousins, but you want some exposure in this game. Jordan Addison's a great play. And a huge pay down. 500 cheaper than Mike Williams, who's 1,600 cheaper than Keenan Allen, who's almost 2,000 cheaper than Justin Jefferson, 1,700, right? So Jordan Addison is got a good matchup, right? They're throwing him the ball quite, not quite a bit, but they're throwing to him efficiently. Downfield, he's making plays. So obviously the Chargers have given up the most fantasy points to wide receivers so far this season. Just a high total. So Jordan Addison is a great stackable option. Zay Flowers, I think I'm going to move to a cash play for sure. Now against Indy's secondary, I said in the beginning of the season, they don't have anybody there. It's a lot of replacements. So 5,400, we already know. OBJ is out. Second most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, so that says it there. Plus being a huge favorite. I think they're at 7, maybe 8 still. I think they might have went down a little bit with all the injuries that they have, which is concerning, but I look at Cincinnati as a slightly better defense, especially the pass rush, that defensive line, than Indy. So Zay Flowers and Lamar have had a pretty good connection. 5,400, I love the price. Nico Collins at 5,300 playing Jacksonville as a cash play. It's just the ownership is going to be there for him, right? His price per points, I think he's averaging a high teens points per game at this point. Jacksonville does scare me, though. It is concerning, but he is getting the most targets for Houston. He's one of the scarier cash plays, right? I think just because of how high owned he is, he's going to be a cash play. I have to put him there as cash because he's going to be higher owned. But I look for someone like Drake London better. But Brandon Cooks, really quick, 5,200 against Arizona. Looking healthy, so seems like he is going to be a good to go on Sunday. Arizona doesn't have really any good secondary. We saw Daniel Jones able to throw all over them. It could be a quick blowout, which is concerning. Same thing for CeeDee Lamb, but I still think Brandon Cooks has a really good opportunity in this game to get some points and have finally a really good fantasy game. At 5,200, he's a good tournament piece to get in some lineups. But Drake London at 5,000. Detroit giving up 39.3 fantasy points a game to wide receivers. It's pretty much Drake London and Mac Hollins getting a lot of the targets. We'll talk about Kyle Pitts here shortly. the matchup doesn't really concern me as far as who he's going to see. It's more of Drake London getting volume. If he gets volume, he's very efficient with it. So 5,000, I think it's a great solid piece, a value piece, right? But for cash. So I really like him. Rashard Bateman, 4,600 against Indy with OBJ out, becomes a number 2. Obviously, someone like Nelson Aguilar, Devin Duvernay get in there and get volume, right? But I think Rashard Bateman's got a really good matchup this week. Obviously, do prefer Zay Flowers, but 4,600, he's a good pay down price player for me, so I really like that. Treylon Burks I don't have in here, but just seeing and hearing kind of about DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks could move up a little bit. I still think the matchup is bad for Tennessee wide receivers in general. For Tennessee in general, I think it's a bad matchup, but that is something to watch out for. Is if DeAndre Hopkins is out, Treylon Burks obviously becomes a wide receiver 1, but it is a bad matchup. Josh Reynolds here is a huge cash play. He's getting a lot of ownership right now against Atlanta. It's just a bad matchup for Detroit wide receivers, right? Amon-Ra is clearly matchup proof as well. He just gets high volume. He's able to get open on the short passes, and that's how he eats, right? 10-yard reception, stuff like that, 15. Not going to be a down the field guy usually. He's not usually a yak kind of receiver. He's just someone you throw the ball to and he's going to come down with it one way or another. But Josh Reynolds, 4,200. The amount of fantasy points Josh Reynolds has got, I think, has exceeded people's expectations. And he's at 4,200. It's a great piece to have. Amon-Ra I had as questionable throughout the week. That was just put in there just in case he gets out, but leaning towards he is going to play. Atlanta, like I said, played Green Bay, played Carolina, so it's not like the greatest matchups. You got to remember Green Bay was without Aaron Jones and without Christian Watson, and I believe Romeo Doubs as well last week, if I'm not mistaken. But 4,200, I think it's a great tournament play. Some value plays, Adam Thielen, 3,900 against Seattle. Seattle, we're going to deeply look at the injury status for Seattle. They have a lot of guys questionable going into Sunday, so we'll see what that looks like. But obviously, I think between him and Jonathan Mingo, they're the only 2 real threats as wide receivers. Andy Dalton's going to be the quarterback, so we don't know exactly what that's going to look like as well. But Seattle, 54.5 fantasy points a game to wide receivers. So it's not the greatest thing, but there could be some injuries that make Adam Thielen very playable. It seems like Bryce Young trusted him. Let's see if Andy Dalton does as well. 3,800 is Jaden Reed. It's the same thing. He's just getting fantasy points. He is. If Watson's in, I don't love him, though, anymore. Not in that aspect. I just don't love the play. But if Watson is out, he's a viable option there at 3,800. 3,500, I have Justin Watson as a tournament piece. I believe there's opportunity for somebody at in Kansas City to get some type of wide receiver 1. Justin Watson has that opportunity against the Bears defense here. I don't love it. It's a tournament play, but I want to get some type of Kansas City exposure when they're huge favorites, right? Especially if you like Patrick Mahomes. River Craft here at 3,400 is another good tournament play. If Jalen Waddle's out, right, Denver, I think, has some solid pieces at secondary, especially Patrick Surtain. But it seems like Kraft is a guy that just goes under the radar, just gets some weird type of volume, but gets enough volume in games where Waddle and Hill played. Now, if Waddle's out, he has some opportunity to get a little more volume, so that's something to look out for. It's not the best matchup at all, but I think it is a decent matchup, and with Waddle being out, get some more volume. And then the last tournament play that I have is Rashid Rice against the Bears. Now, this one is concerning, right? Kadarius Toney questionable, which do it or not, but just seeing him week 1 getting that red zone touchdown, going against the Bears here, I think Kansas City's going to be able to move the ball. I'm looking at Rashid Rice as a guy that can get a touchdown this weekend, so that's what I'm kind of banking on at 3,300. It's a really good pay down option. So that's it for wide receivers, guys. Switching over to tight ends now. Travis Kelce, 7,200 is by far by none my favorite tight end play this week. It seems like there's a lot of question marks and uncertainties at tight end. I think he's one of the best to go to. Obviously, he's been the best tight end. I'm not trying to oversell him anymore. It's just a solid play. TJ Hawkinson, 6,500 against the Chargers, has the best PFF advantage for tight end matchup. Obviously, the high total. The thing that is concerning is Chargers giving up only 7.5 points to tight ends, but you also have to factor in of who they've faced, Drew Smythe and Chig. So it's not like they've faced some good tight ends. So seeing a high volume tight end could be different. So he's a tournament play, not really a cash yet until we see some difference with Chargers against tight ends. I feel like they've played tight ends fairly well. Derwin James back there. Mark Andrews, 6,000 with OBJ out. That's another pass catcher taking some volume, but we saw Nelson Aguilar and Devin Duvernay getting some work. So don't know exactly what that looks like. Indy's played tight ends pretty good, so he's not one of my more favorable matchups. Usually he is, but as of right now, he's just not. Evan Ingram is interesting with Zay Jones out. He has the second best PFF tight end matchup. The thing with Houston against tight ends, though, they've only seen 9 targets against them. So Evan Ingram's a target guy with Zay Jones out. Christian Kirk has a pretty bad matchup, so Evan Ingram could get some higher volume at 4,800, right? A $1,200 pay down from Mark Andrews in that high tier. I think he leads that mid-tier tight end ranking for me. Hunter Henry's another tournament play at 4,100 against the Jets. Becoming the top target for the team, not only in the red zone, but just Mac Jones is seeming to trust him. The offensive coordinator that they have one in O'Brien is targeting Hunter Henry as well. And the Jets have given up 14.7 points per game to tight end. So that's a plus for him. Sam Laporta going against Atlanta, 6th best PFF tight end advantage. Montgomery's out, so it looks like Jahmyr Gibbs, Craig Reynolds, you don't have that big, I'd say more power back. Yep. Obviously, Gibbs is probably more explosive, but that is somebody else to where Gibbs is going to get rushing attempts, so he might not be on the field as much for the passing. And with the more favorable matchups to Atlanta cornerbacks, I look at someone like Sam Laporta to be a guy that can excel in this game script. So Atlanta giving up 11.7 average points per game to tight ends. Kyle Pitts, if Kyle Pitts had volume, he would be a smash play immediately in this game, but he's not getting enough volume to be sufficient. He just needs to go to a team that's going to give him targets. That's what he needs. So Detroit giving up 18.8 fantasy points a game to tight end. This is a game where he can succeed. He just needs volume. That's all I want is Kyle Pitts to get volume. 3,900. Gonna get exposure to him. I will continue to get burnt. I'm hoping one day R.D. Smith just trusts Kyle Pitts and throws in the ball. Like makes plays so he gets the ball thrown to him. I get what they do, but just give Kyle Pitts a chance. That's all we ask for. But going on, Hayden Hurst, 3,800 against Seattle. Could be an option with Dalton as the quarterbacks. Seattle giving up the 5th most yards to tight end so far this season. And granted, I keep talking about it. This is only a 2-game sample size, so don't read too much into it. It all depends on matchups that we've seen, right? Teams can look really good on paper, but when you see who they've played, it doesn't seem as good as it appears. So Hayden Hurst is a tournament option. Probably not going to have a lot of exposure to him, but some exposure. Jake Ferguson, 3,600 against Arizona. Arizona giving up the 4th most yards to tight ends. Has the 5th best PFF tight end advantage. And leads the league in red zone targets. So I'm definitely going to get someone like that in my lineups. Dalton Kincaid, 3,400 is a cash play for me. I think Washington's offense honestly is going to struggle. Dalton Kincaid lining up as wide receiver quite a bit. So I think it's really cheap for a wide receiver, right? Or a tight end that's basically a wide receiver. We all know he's a wide receiver in Buffalo's offense. So 3,400 Dalton Kincaid. I love in this matchup. He's a good pay down price at tight end to allow you to pay up for some of the wide receivers, possibly Tony Pollard, Bijan, stuff like that. So I really like Dalton Kincaid this week. Chig is getting a lot of ownership. I don't get it. I'm assuming it's because DeAndre Hopkins is possibly out. But Cleveland has played tight ends very good. Chig has not gotten the volume needed to, really blow my mind. Like last year, I get it. This year has not looked the same. Maybe Derrick Henry being questionable and possibly being out. Maybe that's why. But I like Tajay Spears, so he's got a lot of ownership. That's why he's a value piece for me. Adam Troutman's another value piece for me. Miami giving up 20.5 fantasy points per game to tight ends. Dulich out. We know Troutman is the tight end one and leads a team in red zone targets. So if they're able to get downfield on this Miami defense, right? Vic Fangio playing his team. So take that how you will. But Adam Troutman, I think, could be a solid piece this week. And then Drew Smythe, 2,900. Could be another guy, same as Kraft, to where I don't love him, but with Waddle being out, we don't know who could see some uptick in volume besides Tyreek Hill. And then finishing off, guys, with defenses. Cowboys Chiefs, obviously, good plays, right? But are you willing to pay up for a defense? I think Cowboys defense is really good, even with Trayvon Diggs out. I think they'll have guys that step up. But it's that defensive line. It's that box that Dallas's defense has, right? That makes them so scary. And, I mean, it's Dallas, right? The amount of fantasy points that they're averaging right now is more than quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers are averaging. So I definitely do think it's worth the pay up. I just wouldn't overdo it in lineups if you're playing 150s. Chiefs, kind of the same thing. I'm expecting Justin Fields to have his best game he's had. I think Chiefs defense is very solid. Clearly saw it against Jacksonville last week. But I look for Justin Fields to have a bounce back game. I don't know what that entirely entails, but as 12.5 point favorites, I'm going to want some exposure to that defense, right? Patriots, 3,500 against the Jets, right? I think the Jets are going to include Breece Hall this week. But we saw how these teams have played with Zach Wilson as quarterback, so I want to get some exposure to the Patriots defense with that. Cleveland's defense, right? Tennessee could possibly be without Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins, so both those guys are out. I think Cleveland's defense becomes probably one of the favorite plays, right? Their defense has been very solid. Pittsburgh got some things past them last week, but I believe they have an opportunity at a good game against the Titans with two of the biggest stars on Tennessee being out. But we'll see how that looks. Buffalo against Washington, I think it's a good spot for Buffalo. I think matchups just favor Buffalo in all aspects. So looking at them at 2,900. 2,800 is Jets defense against New England, right? The Jets, just like their defense is way too good. Playing against Dallas, a team to where the way their defense is and their offense, it's a really great system. It's what Arthur Smith's system wishes it was, right? Dallas just has more talented players there and a quarterback. They're going to get points, right? But New England is not that team, right? They stopped Buffalo. I think Jets against New England. We saw what the Jets kind of did to New England last year. Obviously some different pieces, but Jets defense overall 2,800 I think is one of my favorite plays. And then Washington's defense 2,400. The defensive line is just so good, and Buffalo's offensive line is not impressive. We saw what happened when Josh Allen played the Jets, who had a solid, I'd say really good defensive line. Washington probably has the best defensive line by far, by none. And we saw what happened when Josh Allen got pressured, though. Last week, we didn't really see it at all. But Commanders' defense is probably my favorite pay-down defense of the week. So, hope you guys did enjoy this breakdown on wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses. If you guys are looking for the quarterbacks and or running backs, both those videos put out earlier this week. If you guys are looking to join us, the link for that will be in the description down below. And I will see you guys in the next one.